For Prayers for the World, we thought it appropriate to change things just a little bit today. In today's Prayers for the World, we'd like to offer a prayer for Mrs. Muhlenberg. If you don't know this already, most of you should know this by now, but she was diagnosed with a form of cancer called Hodgkin's lymphoma. She will be out of school the rest of the year, and she will as she starts her treatments, she'll be very vulnerable to infection, so she will be out for the rest of the year. She is most likely starting her chemotherapy today, in fact, probably right now. If you have not had a chance to write a note to Mrs. Muhlenberg in one of your classes and would like to, I bought a couple of cards yesterday, and we got some pieces of paper on 3 or 2 tables right there in the lobby, and you could quickly write her a note of encouragement, and those will be mailed to her over the next couple of weeks. If it's too crowded over there right after chapel, feel free to stop by my room, and I'll have those cards and papers out for the next couple days at noon. Cancer is it's a word that justifiably strikes fear into our hearts. Although this type of cancer has relatively good cure rates, and her doctors are generally very positive about their ability to treat this cancer, the path from here is uncertain and at the very least difficult. The treatment is painful, life will be difficult, and the outcome is by no means clear and fraught with fear, and this is very serious. A great Christian writer, one of my favorites, noted about human suffering. He said this: "As to the why of suffering, we get no firm answer. The meaning eludes us. Our net of understanding is too small." He goes on to quote Isaiah 45, who says of God, "God, you are truly a God who hides yourself from us. We don't always get answers. We are left only with something of a lament, which is a kind of existential question mixed with anguish and some justified anger." And then after lament, we are left with prayer and hope and kind of a stepping out into nothing trust. So please join me as we take a prayer from the Book of Common Prayer and pray for Mrs. Muhlenberg. Could you join me in prayer, please? O God, you give strength to the weak and comfort to those who suffer. Please mercifully accept our prayers. Grant to your servant, Mrs. Muhlenberg, the help of your power, that her sickness may be turned into health and her sorrow into joy. Strengthen her by your life-giving spirit. Grant your wisdom and kindness to those who treat her, and grant your wisdom, kindness, and love to her friends and family and her children that surround her. We pray all this through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Please rise.
This Lent, we're focusing on reconciliation. Reconciliation is a theme of a Christian life, and reconciling ourselves to other people is one way in which we can restore shalom in a broken world. In Romans 12:16, Paul says, "Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly." And again in Romans 15:5-7, he says, "Live in harmony with one another, in accordance with Jesus Christ, so that together you may, with one voice, glorify the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. Welcome one another, just as Christ has welcomed you." One of the places that living in this sort of harmony and reconciliation with one another is hardest is the internet, specifically social media. Today's speaker is Stephanie Tuttle, a lawyer who specializes in social media and laws about it, and it is our hope that by better understanding this, we can better understand how to live in shalom in this modern area of life. Please join me in welcoming Stephanie Tuttle.
Thank you. Good morning. Wow, there's a lot of you out there. How are you guys doing? How many days till spring break? 17. April 2. I'm leaving April 2. I'm flying out of here going to Florida, so I'm counting down with you. Thanks so much for having me here today. I think I've spoken to some of you in a smaller class setting, so to those of you who have heard this already, my most humble of apologies if I'm boring you the second time around. My stories don't change, my jokes don't change, so just laugh and tell me I'm funny anyway. I am an attorney. I work in the Granville, Michigan area, and I've been in practice now for 6 years. This is kind of a second career for me. I decided to go back to school after my kids got a little bit older. And one of the reasons why I actually started getting so interested in the intersection of social media and the law is because I'm a mom too. I have a daughter, Abby, who is 18. She's a senior at Jenison. So, you know, when I was listening to all of you seniors this morning, I was thinking that would be my daughter. So she's going to Western next year, and I have a son, Ben, who's 20, and he's a sophomore at Ferris right now. And by the way, girls cross-country runners, any of you here? You guys are fast. My daughter runs cross-country, and every time I see the Grand Rapids Christian girls, I think, wow, they're really, really impressive. So anyway, I became interested in this whole thing of sexting when I was listening to my daughter, especially, and her friends would come over to our house, and I always feed everybody that stops by, and so we'd be sitting around the dinner table, and they would start talking about some of the things that they hear were going on at school with different people, and the buzz and the chatter became about these pictures that people were sending. And do we have a PowerPoint? Do I have to do something here? Anyway, there we go. Perfect, thank you. So I started to investigate what they were talking about, what these pictures were, and why students were doing some of the things that they're doing. And I started to realize only when I had a guy come into my office about 4 years ago, and he said, Stephanie, I had the cops at my house yesterday. They had a search warrant, and they seized my laptop and my cell phone. And he had been trading pictures with a 17-year-old girl. And he said, you know, what's going on with this? I had been practicing criminal law for about 3 years at that point. I worked at the Kent County Prosecutor's Office. I worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office. I had enough experience under my belt as a criminal defense attorney, and I started to have to educate myself about how Michigan law is applied to students who are sending inappropriate photos of themselves or other people, and I was shocked, and I was surprised, and I thought, how in the world can we expect students and teachers and parents to know and understand how serious this stuff is if even I didn't get it as an attorney? And so I wrote a letter to area principals and administrators, and I started going into schools and volunteering my time and talking to kids. I think I've talked to about 40,000 kids so far in the West Michigan area. So what I have to say to you this morning, I promise you, is very, very relevant to your life, where you're at right now. If you look on the news, you saw that a kid from West Catholic, the kid that made those bomb threats, guess what they found on his computer? Child porn, yeah, all right? And that's not the only one. There's a Three Rivers case. There's a Reed City case. You guys have probably all heard about the Granville High School case. This stuff is happening, and it's happening to kids who don't expect that their phone is going to be looked at. So, with that said, when we're talking about sexting for our purposes this morning, we're talking only about the images. Now, sexting generally is comprised of both words, like sexual banter, and images. But for our purposes this morning, I'm only going to be talking to you about the pictures. And I'm not trying to minimize the impact of words, because every single one of us knows how powerful the word is. It can be used for very, very good things and for very, very harmful things. But I'm only going to be talking about images today. So, sexting is legal if both parties are 18 years of age or older. All right. I am sure that these ladies are over 18, right? And I'm positive that they are looking at a recipe and nothing else on that little phone of theirs. But let's say they were looking at an inappropriate picture of someone over the age of 18. Are they making a bad choice? Yeah, yeah. But they're not committing a crime. If, however, the picture or the person in the picture that they were looking at was under the age of 18, then they've got a problem. They are committing a crime. So it matters the age of the person on the date that the photograph was taken. I used to have you all raise your hand if you had a cell phone. I probably need to change this slide. You all have cell phones, and without a doubt. How many of you have smartphones? Can you raise your hand? Oh, yeah. All right. I just got one myself about a year ago. They're pretty fantastic, and I only use it to check email and Facebook, but, you know. If you have one of those smartphones, remember this and listen carefully. And this might seem like a simple thing, but it impacts several things here. You are carrying around a computer or a computer-related device in your pocket, and you're all like, well, yeah, it hooks up to the internet, I know that. But for purposes of Michigan law, it's very important a little bit later on when we talk about how a prosecutor can charge you. Let's see, we're going to skip that today. And then
we need to tell you about more than 20% of teenagers admit to sending naked.
Thank you. Let me just set this up a little bit. This is a video that I'm going to have you watch. The young man depicted in the video is from Florida, and I get it, he's a little goofy looking at first, but he's actually very articulate. He was charged under the child porn laws in Florida, and he describes how this has impacted his life. And the reason I show this to you is that Michigan law is almost identical to Florida law. So students who are being charged here in Michigan are experiencing almost the same consequences. So take a look.
Parents out there, there's a worrisome trend we need to tell you about. More than 20% of teenagers admit to sending naked photos of themselves to other teens. It's called sexting. And in Florida, it's a felony. Philip Alpert found this out the hard way after sending naked pictures of his girlfriend to his friends. And Philip joins us live now. Philip, as we understand it, about a year and a half ago, you got into a fight with your girlfriend. And I guess to get back at her, you sent out a naked photo of her that she had sent to you to lots of people, including your buddies, her relatives, even some teachers. What were you thinking that day?
Well, actually, it wasn't my friends. What I did was I was really upset. It was early in the morning. I mean, not that it's an excuse, but I had her email address, and I just went in, I hit select all. I wasn't targeting, teachers or anyone specifically. It just happened that those people were in her email list.
I see. Okay, thank you. And as a result of this, of sending out this naked photo, you got in trouble, and you ultimately were convicted of a crime that you say went well beyond the act that you committed. What were you convicted of?
Technically, I was convicted of sending of child pornography.
You are now classified as a sex offender, and as a result, we understand you have been kicked out of college. You are on probation for 5 years. You had to register as a sex offender. You have to take a mandatory sex offender class for $1,500 a year. You're not allowed to use the internet. You're not allowed to live with your dad because he lives too close to a school. What has your life been like since this happened to you?
Well, just from what you mentioned there, you could probably imagine it's been bad, but knowing also that my neighbors come to my house and try to talk to me, make sure I'm not going to harm their children, that former friends of mine no longer wish to speak with me, family members are absolutely just, I mean, crushed because of this. Luckily, they've stood by me, but I know that I've hurt them at the same time, and it's not something that I ever wanted to do. It's something that I highly regret. I mean, I really do, and not just because I got in trouble, but because I know I hurt the girl, her family, and my friends and my family, too.
And do you think that the punishment fit the crime?
I don't. Not that I'm saying that I can justify this, not that I'm saying that I don't deserve a punishment, because I absolutely do. I just think that having to be a registered sex offender till at least the age of 43 and 5 years of probation and getting kicked out of college and being on a list for people that harm little kids and do sexual deviant acts towards very small children, I don't think that that is fair.
And yet, Philip, you pleaded guilty to this. Why did you plead guilty to child pornography?
Okay, and then his lawyer gets up there, and then it gets really boring, so I never make you watch that part. But you can see how Philip's life was really altered. It was changed. He couldn't finish his college education because of this, all right? And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my client in a minute who was in the same boat. But what is Michigan law? You heard a little snippet of what Florida law is. Michigan law is... There we go. All right. I'm going to be talking about 3 statutes today. And those statutes are MCL 750.145C. And when I say MCL, that's an abbreviation for Michigan Compiled Law. That means that's a law that's been enacted by the legislature in the state of Michigan. So 750.145C is the child pornography statute in the state of Michigan, all right? 750.145D is the prohibition of using a computer to commit a crime. All of you who have smartphones, your little ears should be perking up. You can't use any sort of computer or computer-related device to commit a crime. That's a second potential charge. And then we're going to be talking about the sex offender registry. So first of all, let's start by, I want to kind of walk you through the child porn statute, just very briefly. It's a lengthy statute. It's about 8 pages when you print it out, so you're getting the cliff notes here. 750.145C, the title of the statute is Child Sexually Abusive Activity or Material. Child sexually abusive material is what we call child porn, all right? Within that statute, there are various terms that are defined. As lawyers, we love to define terms, and this statute is certainly no different than any other. The word child is very strictly defined within this statute. It means anyone that is less than 18 years of age. So if I have somebody who's 17 years old, 364 days, they're turning 18 tomorrow. Today, they are still considered a child for purposes of the child porn statute. And just the fact that they turn 18 tomorrow never ever makes a picture they took today okay. Because the thing that we look at is how old was the person on the date that the photograph was taken. The fact that that person subsequently turns 18 never makes that okay. Now, one of the things that most people are really surprised to hear is that there is absolutely no exception anywhere in this statute for a person who takes a photograph of him or herself. So, you're 17, you're home alone, you're taking some photos. If they qualify as child porn, you have just created or manufactured child pornography of yourself. Doesn't matter if you consent to it. The fact is, you are a child. If the picture qualifies, that's it. Now, what does the picture need to look like? I'm not going to get real graphic with you here today. What I will say is there are certain terms within the statute. Again, everything is defined. The photo needs to be of a person under the age of 18. It needs to portray erotic nudity. Erotic nudity is further defined in the statute as for the purpose of producing lustful thoughts, all right? So some of you are like, well, hey, my mom and dad took pictures of me when I was like a year or two old in the bathtub, and you know, I've got my little rubber ducky. I have some pictures of my kids like that too. But the difference between those pictures and the pictures that I'm talking about is that those pictures were not created to produce lustful thoughts. They're created because you guys are all cute and sweet at one point, and your parents wanted to capture that memory, right? And, you know, those of you who are seniors, maybe you'll see those pictures surface at your graduation open house, right? Yeah. But the difference between those and the pictures that I'm worried about is really the motive behind them. A good rule of thumb for you as students is anything that your bathing suit should be covering is probably not a picture that you want to be taking of yourself, all right? So that's kind of the criteria that we're looking at here. Now, let's talk very quickly about using a computer to commit a crime. Every photo, every image carries with it a penalty under the child porn statute, right? If it qualifies. Then we have another possibility. We have a second felony charge that a prosecutor can bring for the same photo. So you could have one photo and two felony charges. And by the way, a felony is the most serious category of crimes that we have here in the state of Michigan. It means it's punishable by more than 1 year in jail. That's hard prison time. A misdemeanor is kind of our smaller crime category, and those crimes are punishable by up to 1 year in jail. So if you've got a felony charge, it's serious. If you've got two felony charges, it's very serious. Using a computer to commit a crime, the maximum penalty is 10 years in prison. So, practically speaking, what does this mean? And just to give you some perspective on this, this thing doesn't, there we go. The penalties for minor sexting are almost the same as possession and distribution of cocaine under Michigan law. That's how serious this stuff is, all right? So we don't mess around with it. All right, there are 3 ways, and I'm going to just briefly touch on the 3 ways that you can be charged under the child porn statute. There's taking the photos, distributing the photos, and simply having the photos, all right? First of all, taking the photos. This is called creation or manufacture of child pornography. This is you or someone else taking a picture of a person under the age of 18 that qualifies as child porn, bathing suit areas, okay? The maximum penalty under this statute is 20 years in prison. It's a 20-year felony. It's a $100,000 fine. Now, when I say the maximum penalty, these are penalties that are reserved for the most serious offenders. So when a person is sentenced in the state of Michigan for a felony, those sentences are calculated via the sentencing guidelines, and they take into account a person's prior criminal record. They take into account what they're being charged with, the seriousness of that crime, and they calculate it all on a grid. And then they come up with a range of months for prison. So a first-time offender who is being sentenced under this particular statute for creation of child pornography, if they have no prior record, they're looking at between 6 and 12 months in the county jail. Now, let's talk about distributing the photos. This is the act of somehow affirmatively sending that material on. That means you have the picture and you're texting it, you're emailing it, you're putting it on Instagram, you are Snapchatting it, you are retweeting it, you are doing something affirmatively to share or spread that image. That is a distribution. A distribution can even be as simple as transferring an image from your laptop to a thumb drive. That is how simple a distribution is, all right? That carries with it a maximum penalty of 7 years in prison, a $50,000 fine, and then, of course, another potential 10-year felony if you use a computer for your distribution. And then we have the simple act of having the photos. Okay. Could you advance the slide? This is not working for me anymore. There we go. Okay, having the photos. This is the category that most of the kids that I work with have been charged under, all right? This is called knowing possession of child pornography. Again, it has to, the photo has to qualify, person under the age of 18, erotic nudity. The penalty is 4 years in prison, a $10,000 fine, and then the potential for another 10-year felony for using a computer to commit a crime. This is just simply having it on your device. If you're caught with it, if your phone is confiscated and searched for whatever reason, you have this stuff on there, you are exposing yourself to a child pornography charge. And I'm going to talk with you, there we go, a little bit about what it means to possess something under the law. There is a legal construct called constructive possession, and that means you have something within your dominion and control. It doesn't necessarily mean you have it physically in your hand, but you have it within your control and within your wingspan. I see this a lot with like minor in possession of alcohol cases, MIPs. I have kids that come in and they'll say, I was in a car with a bunch of people, somebody had some booze, they were all drinking, I wasn't, and we got caught, and I was still charged with an MIP and I wasn't drinking. Why? And the simple reason for that is because by virtue of being in the car, you have put yourself in a position where you are, you have the alcohol within your constructive possession, within your wingspan. You had the opportunity to drink it if you wanted it, and that's a violation of the law. Same thing with child pornography. And let me tell you a little bit more about my client, who I mentioned at the beginning, who came into my office and said, my cell phone and my laptop were confiscated. He was trading nude pictures with a 17-year-old girl. And what he said to me was, I think I'm okay because I deleted all the pictures. And I said, well, you know, we'll see what they find. They took his electronic devices to the Michigan State Police Forensic Computer Lab, and using really advanced forensic software, they were able to retrieve 7 photographs from my client's hard drive, from the unallocated space of his hard drive. And those 7 photographs absolutely qualified as child pornography. It was of a 17-year-old girl, and it portrayed erotic nudity. And so they charged him with 7 felonies. They charged him with 1 felony for each picture that he had. They also charged him with 3 counts of using a computer to commit a crime. And they also charged him with furnishing obscenity to a minor because he was sending photos back to her. So I'm looking at these charges, and as his attorney, it's my job to poke as many holes in the prosecutor's case as I can and try to, you know, do some damage control. And I said, how in the world can you, Mr. Prosecutor, say that my client had knowing possession of this stuff? Who out of any of us can control what kind of material someone decides to send to our computer? Who can control what kind of emails that we get, what kind of content that people decide to send to us, right? My client did the right thing. He got those pictures from this girl and he deleted them, right? What else can he do? He did not have possession of those photos, because it's not like he could have opened up his laptop and looked at those pictures himself. He couldn't pull them up because he didn't have that fancy forensic software, right? Well, I was gaining some traction with the prosecutor with my argument, and then the prosecutor decided that it might be a good idea to look at the young lady's computer. And so this girl loved her some Skype. I mean, she was a Skyping fool. And I don't know if you guys realize this, but when you Skype, it creates a transcript of all of your Skype conversations. Yeah. And so what they did was they printed out all of her Skype logs, and they gave them to me to review. So imagine, if you will, how embarrassed this 17-year-old girl was, thinking that I was reading all of her Skype conversations. You know, how awful for her, and really how awful for me to have to sit there and read that. It was not my favorite thing. But about halfway through, she was having a Skype conversation with my client. And they were going back and forth, and then he said, hey, I want you to send me some more of those pictures. And then he went on to graphically describe exactly what he wanted to see. And as soon as I read that, I thought, oh, he's toast. Because what he did was he made an affirmative action, really. He exercised dominion and control over those photos by asking for them to be sent to his computer. And that's all it took for the prosecutor to show that he had, at one time, knowing possession of that content. So we ended up accepting a plea agreement. He pled to 1 count of possession of child pornography, 1 count of using a computer to commit a crime, and he was sentenced to 6 months in the Kent County Jail. He is a registered sex offender, and what that means is he needs to, every year, he has to report where he lives, where he works, what kind of car he drives, the people he's associating with, and he's got to do that for the next 10 years. So we've talked a little bit about, this felony concept. What does it mean in reality for someone to have a felony on their record? It means that you lose the right to vote, you lose the right to bear arms, so no more hunting or whatever you do with guns. You're usually not able to obtain a professional license. You can't be a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, well, sometimes a lawyer, because we're a little more forgiving in our profession for some reason. We let lots of interesting people in. But you're going to have a hard time finding a job that pays well, because on every single employment application you ever fill out, you're going to have to disclose the fact that you have a felony conviction. And as an employer, if I'm looking at 2 equally qualified candidates, I've got one without a record and one with a felony conviction, I'm going to probably hire the one with a clean record. Anything that requires a background check is going to be problematic. You will not be able to volunteer for a whole lot of things anymore. Not to mention the sex offender registry, which I talked to you about briefly. Depending on what level your crime is, you could be spending 15 years on the public or 15 years to life. 15 years on the non-public or 15 years to life on the public registry. So I took these probation requirements. This is just a small sampling of the probation requirements my client had once he got out of jail after his 6-month stint in the Kent County Jail. He is not allowed to live in a house with anyone under the age of 17. He can't have any contact whatsoever with anyone under the age of 17. So if he had nieces or nephews or cousins, nope, no more, no contact. He cannot own or possess a computer or any device capable of connecting to the internet. He can't even live in a house where such a device is. He cannot marry, date, or have any romantic involvement with a person who has physical custody of someone under the age of 17. So they tell you who you can and can't go out with. Now, he also cannot possess or use any photographic equipment. Try to imagine, if you will, trying to find a cell phone that doesn't have a camera in it. It's almost impossible, really. And so he has a difficulty finding ways to communicate. He cannot work or live within 1,000 feet of a school. He cannot be within 500 feet of a park, swimming pool, etc. And so as you can see, this being on the sex offender registry obviously is very restrictive. And there's a huge stigma in society for people who are in that sex offender registry. So what do you as students need to do to protect yourself, right? Because none of you want that kind of a life. You all have bright futures ahead of you. And I'm going to give you a couple of ideas for things that you can do. First and foremost, you need to stop taking the pictures, all right? That's just an easy one. Don't do it. If somebody sends something to you, here's what I need you to do right away. I need you to get a parent, a teacher, or some other trusted adult involved. And the reason I tell you that is because we in the criminal justice system view this material as like nuclear waste material. We have very strict protocols about how we can handle this, where we can view it, under what conditions it can be viewed. And so when you as a student are holding on to this, it's a really, really big deal, and I don't want you to walk down that road alone. So please make sure that you talk with someone that you know and you trust. If somebody sends something to you, my best piece of advice for you is to respond and to say, listen, I didn't ask for this. I don't want anything like this anymore. Never send me anything like that. Thank you. Print a copy of your response. What have I just done? I've given you a layer of protection for anyone ever being able to say that you asked for that. You exercised constructive possession over that, okay? That's how you can protect yourself from stuff being sent to your phone, your devices. Now, delete that photo once you've taken care of it, all right? Never, ever, ever send it or forward it to a parent, because what have you done? You've just distributed it. Even if it's to your parent, don't ever forward it to any one of your teachers. You can show it to them, say, this is what I have, help me deal with this, all right? But don't forward it to anybody. Don't even forward it to a police officer, because that is a distribution. You have to be very, very careful about how you handle this stuff. Now, all of this information I'm giving you, all of this stuff about responding to that person comes with one big caveat. If you received that photograph as part of a campaign to bully or harass or threaten or intimidate another student, all bets are off. You call the authorities immediately, because kids have committed suicide over this kind of stuff when photographs are circulating in the school. We don't take this lightly, and that's a time when charges do need to be brought, okay? So if that's the case and it's happening at school, please let your teachers or your administrators know. So can you just delete the picture? No. You never know once it's out there. Snapchat isn't safe. I mean, really, everyone can screenshot. Even I know how to screenshot, okay? Don't ever count on it disappearing, because even if nobody screenshotted it, you can still find that on the SIM card of a cell phone with forensic software. Now, some of you are saying, yeah, this is great, this is all wonderful. I am never going to be in that position because I'm smarter. I'm never going to get caught. I've done, you may have exchanged some photographs like this with a boyfriend or a girlfriend, but like really, who is ever going to look at your phone? And let me tell you a story about a young woman who is actually my next door neighbor. And she was dating a guy a couple years ago. She was 15, he was 17. She was going to Jenison, he was going to Wyoming Park, and they were in love. And they were separated by time and space. And so their relationship was all over, text and email and that sort of thing. And unfortunately, they started making some really bad choices, and they were sending nude photographs back and forth to each other. And they were not sharing those photos with anybody, all right? They weren't showing, hey, this is my boyfriend. Nothing like that was happening. It stayed just between the two of them, except he forgot that when he got his new phone, he had it set up so that all of his texts were automatically forwarded to his Wyoming Park High School email account. Yeah. I do that too with all of my texts. I have them sent to my work email, so I have records of them. Well, unbeknownst to him, a resource officer from the Wyoming Police Department reviews all of those emails on a periodic basis. And one morning came in to do that and saw some of the photos of my neighbor. So, long, painful story short, they brought charges against both of them. Now, my neighbor lives in Ottawa County, and she was 15, so she was lucky. She was adjudicated as a minor, so she had a juvenile felony on her record. She was able to take care of the charge with what they call consent calendar, and she was able to apply for an expungement of that juvenile felony once she turned 18, and she successfully did that. Her boyfriend, however, was 17 years old, charged as an adult in Kent County, and he is on the sex offender registry. He spent 6 months in the Kent County jail. And again, this was something that neither of them ever intended to happen, but it did happen. And that's my message for you, is once it's out there, you never know where it's going to end up. So my best piece of advice is just don't put yourself in that position to begin with. I don't come around and do these talks because I'm hoping to get some more clients. I don't want you as my client, all right? I really don't. I want each and every one of you to have a full and rewarding and rich life that you deserve. You all have bright futures ahead of you, and doing something like this is a great way to short-circuit that. So thank you for your time this morning. I really appreciate it. Enjoy spring break, and congratulations, seniors.
Next week for chapel, we're going to have small groups meet at the beginning of chapel. We're going to be discussing some issues that were brought up today in social media, and then tie that into reconciliation theme. How do we reconcile ourselves to what may be broken in the internet world? I'd like to thank Stephanie Tuttle one more time. If you join me in thanking her. If you could rise.